So here are three of the main topics that we will cover. We'll talk about cost, the types of aid that you can receive, and then how do you actually apply for this money. So I think how many of you, and you can put this in the chat or you can like unmute yourself, but how many of you have heard that college can be expensive and that may keep you from applying to certain schools? I see the chat going on, yes. So there are different costs that you have to know about in the terminology, so that's what I'm gonna cover now. So the cost of attendance, also known as a sticker price, is what schools have listed on their side. This will be the tuition, books, room and board, and any other fee that you will need to cover or to attend college. This often also includes travel, books, etc. So if you go on the school's website, this price might be a bit scary. However, you have to take into consideration that that's not what you will actually get billed for. What you get billed for is called the direct cost. So this is all the stuff that you will pay directly to the university. And this includes tuition, room and board, and any university fees. But what is actually what you end up paying for college? So what you end up paying for college is called the net price. And as you can see here on the screen, the net price is the attendance cost that students and parents need to pay out of pocket through student loans, grants, scholarships. So schools calculate, or your financial aid package will calculate this based on the school's total cost of attendance. So that big scary sticker price minus any grants, scholarships for which you may be eligible for. And if this seems like a lot of or confusing definition, don't worry, I have a handy graphic for you to see. So as you can see on the screen, the sticker price looks about almost $10,000. However, once you receive your aid or any free money, that is subtracted from that sticker price, and your net price, which is what you will actually cover, tends to be less than $4,000. So definitely not, the $10,000 can look scary, but remember that the net price is what you will actually pay for. And all schools are required to have a net price calculator. So it's similar to what the FAFSA forecast shows you. However, the FAFSA is just a large average. If you go to the specific school that you're interested in applying to, they take into consideration how much aid they can give you and other grants that you may be eligible for there. So you get a better estimate of how much you will actually pay for school. And now we'll talk about the different types of aid. So there are four different types of aid. So you have grants, scholarships, work study, and loans. For grants, this is all free money, and there are federal grants as well as state and institution-based money. Federal grant is usually about $6,000, and this is based on need and your family expected contribution, your EFC, expected family contribution. So the lower your expected family contribution, the higher your federal Pell Grant will be. We also have, North Carolina has also specific grants. We have 4 of those listed here on the screen. And again, this is all free money that you can receive just by filling out the FAFSA. You can be eligible for this money. And some of them are school-based. The other type of aid are scholarships. This tends to be merit-based, usually competitive. Your institution, the school that you're applying to, might have their own scholarship money. There are also national scholarships, such as like the Gates, the Coca-Cola Scholars. And the first bullet points what you can get scholarship for. There are athletic scholarships, academic, leadership, You can just go on Google and type in scholarships for Durham public school students or scholarships for left-handed students. And you might see some of this come up. In addition, there are state, local scholarships that you can apply for. Typically, you will have access to this through your school student services department and also your college advisor. So they will get this local scholarship information. And then you also have work study. So this one is also based on demonstrated need. And this, you will be provided with an on-campus job. Usually you will be working about 10 to 15 hours and the money goes directly to you. This is not to offset any large amount of money. This is just to offset any smaller amounts for you to, make it through college. And typically you will have to, they usually pay you above minimum wage. Just because you're granted a work study does not mean you will automatically get this money. You still have to, go to the university's website and look for these opportunities and then apply. So like you will be applying for a job. And then we have loans. I think sometimes we hear that loans can be scary or students are afraid to take loans. But loans, depending on how you see a loan, I think once you graduate college, you will, have a full-time job and you will be able to pay this loan amount. So, and then there are different types of loans. So you can see the federal government do offer different subsidized and unsubsidized loans. The main difference for this, subsidized, you will not be paying any interest on the loan while you're still in college. The Department of Education pays for this interest rate, and then you will start making payments 6 months after you graduate from college. On the other hand, on subsidized loans, you are the one responsible for paying the interest. So let's say you took out a $1,000 loan for your first year. That $1,000 loan will not be $1,000, it will be slightly more because the interest will continue to accrue. If you don't feel comfortable taking out loans, the government also offers loans for parents. Typically they have higher interest rates, and then there are also private loans. We like to encourage students to go for federal loans because they have lower interest rates than if you go for a private loan. But again, every circumstance is different, and what you have access to is different. So maybe you will not have access to federal loans, so private loan, if you can, this is another way for you to pay for your college education. Okay, so now that I talked to you about the different types of aid and the cost of attendance, the sticker price, we can talk about how to apply for this money. So how you go about applying for aid is by completing your FAFSA. The FAFSA opened yesterday, and it stands for free application for federal student aid. You can go to fafsa.gov to start on your application. And then the priority deadline for North Carolina is March 1st. That is not to say you should wait until then to fill out and submit your FAFSA. You want to do this as soon as possible. Through your FAFSA, you will be able to see if you're eligible for the Pell Grant, those loans that I mentioned. And then you have to take into consideration that every school is different. So you may need to submit your FAFSA by the time you submit your application. And then oftentimes that institutional money or those institutional scholarships come on a first come, first served basis. So that is why it's important for you to fill out your FAFSA as soon as possible. If you fill it out this month, next month, that's a good timeline. But anything after that, it's not as recommended, but you can still fill it out. So why should you fill out the FAFSA? You know, you never know. You can, this free money. So unless you fill it out, you don't know how much aid or what you will be eligible for. It's free to fill out. So if you go to a site and then they start asking you for card information or, you know, money to pay for that FAFSA, that is not the federal website. You need to get out of there and go because it's free for you to fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA does not take your grades into consideration. It's only your income, your parents' income that goes into the FAFSA. And then this is how the FAFSA determines if you are eligible for those grants that I mentioned previously, work study, loans, and this is all need-based. So who's eligible for this money? If you're a US citizen, if you are a permanent resident or green card holder, there are also specific categories, as you can see on the screen, that are eligible for federal student aid, such as refugee, asylum, parolee, veteran immigrant, or if you're eligible for a T visa or your parent has one, you can receive federal aid. Who is not eligible? So if you came here on a visitor visa, if you are a foreign student, a temporary worker, or undocumented student, unfortunately, you are not eligible for federal student aid. However, you can still get institutional based, and this is based on every institution. So check on the institutions that you are interested in applying to, because you may still be eligible for aid from them. You must have a valid social security number to be eligible for financial aid. You know, keep up good grades. And if you're a male, you must be registered with the Selective Service. If you haven't registered when you're going through the FAFSA, it will ask if you want to register, and you have to say yes, or else you won't be considered for financial aid. So how do you fill out your FAFSA? So you will again go to that website, fafsa.gov, but first you will need to create an FSA ID. This is how you sign into your FAFSA and then how you sign at the end. And it is attached to your own social security number and your email address. No one else can have the same information to have an FSA ID. So the FSA ID is like your legal signature, because this is how you will be signing at the end once you complete the FAFSA. If you don't have a social security number, you can still fill out the paper FAFSA for institutions that may require you to do so. And then in order for you to create an FSA ID, you will need your social security number, your phone number, or an email address that will be linked only to you. You need to know how your name appears on your social security card. They will ask you for your date of birth, challenge some questions, you know, in case you get locked out of your account, you want to remember this information, because this is how you can retrieve access to your account. And then they will also ask for your permanent address. It is important that you save this information because you will use this every year that you apply for financial aid. So once you create, or whenever you decide to create your FSA ID, please, whether that is on your phone, email, notepad, I don't know where you save important information, please remember your username and password, because you will use this again next year. And that is where you go and create your FSA ID, FSAID.ed.gov. One thing to note is that one of your parents will need to create an FSA ID, and they need their own unique email address. If they don't have a social security number, that's okay. You can still fill out the FAFSA if you're eligible for financial aid. So on the screen, I have what you will need to go through the FAFSA. So your FSA ID, that email address, your social security number. If you have a driver's license, you'll need that information. If you worked, your tax return, the 1040 and W-2, and then any record of untaxed income or assets in the list of schools that you will be applying to. You can put up to 10 schools on your FAFSA, but if you're applying to more schools, you can always go back and add or send the FAFSA to additional schools, and it's free. And your parents will also, or your parent will also need the same information as you will, and the date of marriage, divorce, or they were widowed, that will also be asked on the FAFSA. So going back to what I mentioned about if your parents don't have a social security number, you just need to input zeros. Don't put any other number, just go ahead and enter zeros. And you still need those two, the date of marriage, divorce, and their income information. If your parents do have a social security number, oftentimes they will be eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool. And this is just a handy add-on that the FAFSA has, where they automatically pull what was reported on their tax return, and that saves you time, and you don't have to input that information directly from your W-2 or the 1040. But it's still recommended that you still have these two documents because you still need to pull some of those numbers for your FAFSA. If your information is not being pulled from the data retrieval tool, that's okay. That's why you will have your 1040 and your W-2, your 2019 information for you to complete your FAFSA. Something to note is that most students are considered independent unless you answer yes to any of these questions. Dependent means that you will be using your parents' tax information. If you can only be considered independent if you answer yes to any of these questions. And you can find all this information on the Federal Student Aid website. If you live with your parents, if they're married, if it's very clear who your parents are, that's the information that you will need to report in your FAFSA. But if you're not sure, maybe your parents are not living together, maybe your parents separated, maybe you live with someone else, this is a handy infographic as to who your parent is for the FAFSA. Because you cannot use anyone else's tax information to complete this. It's only your parents or legal guardians. So what to expect when you are going through the FAFSA? So all the questions you will be answering are based on the documents that I had on that you will need to complete your FAFSA. Then once you go through all of that, so there will be like demographic information for both you and your parent, then that income, assets, and the schools that you will be sending your FAFSA to. And then at the end, you will reach the signature page. Both you and your parent will need to sign your FAFSA, and you will sign this with the same way that you logged in. So with your FSA ID, that's how you will electronically sign and then submit your FAFSA. If your parent doesn't have an FSA ID, what you will do is print a signature page. Once you have that printed, your parent will sign and then mail it to this address, Federal Student Aid Programs, and all this information is listed on that signature page once you print that out. So this is just what to expect when you are getting towards the end of your FAFSA. So congratulations, you have completed your FAFSA. Here on the screen is the estimated expected family contribution. And then this is a different one. Like this is your actually student aid report, the one on the right side. If you made a mistake on your FAFSA, you can go back and correct this. That's totally fine. So there, don't worry if you think you made a mistake. And then something to note is even if your income information changed for this year, you still need to use 2019's information. What then will happen is you will reach out to the school financial aid office directly, and you need to update them of that information. But you have to use 2019 tax return information. And this is what, so you will get your student report after you complete your FAFSA, and this will include your expected family contribution. And that's just how much money the federal government thinks you can, your family can pay for your college based on the information that you provided them. And then your EFC can range from 0 all the way to a large number. Here are the different status once you submit your FAFSA. So your FAFSA will not process right away. You know, it takes some time for them to process. It typically takes about 3 to 5 days. And then once they process your application, then it will say it was successfully processed. If there's anything else that you need to fix or there's something missing, they will know that. So make sure that you go back and find out that information. So check your email and then check your FAFSA portal. And then something that you may be, that may happen to you in the FAFSA says is random, but this doesn't happen to be so random. Some students get selected for verification, especially if you get a 0 expected family contribution. And this is just, this shouldn't scare you. This is just to confirm that the information you shared on the FAFSA is valid and is accurate. And if you do get selected for verification, you do want to submit the documents that the school will ask you for, and make sure that you do so by the school, by the deadline that they're asking you. And typically you may need to like submit your parents' tax return, maybe a tax transcript. It varies by institution, and that institution will let you know if you were selected for verification. So again, here you can just see the cost of attendance, the terminology that we covered at the beginning, and how everything is calculated. So the cost of attendance, you know, is based on those fixed costs that the university will charge you for, plus any variable cost, and that's that big scary number. However, how your financial need is calculated is cost of attendance minus how much your family can contribute to your college education, and then that will determine how much need you have. Another profile, depending if you're applying to any of the schools, so similar to the financial aid, but it's more in debt. And here are the 5 schools that require you to complete the CSS profile. Typically, the schools that have more financial aid, more scholarships for their students will ask you to complete this profile. And there is a cost. So you will, in order for you to complete this profile, the CSS profile, you have to pay $25 initially, and then for every other school that you need to send this to, you have to pay $16. If you receive an SAT fee waiver, and there's other requirements, you can get this fee waived, and all of your CSS profiles will, that you need to send will be waived. And then again, so every school has a different deadline as to when they will need this. But typically it may need to be submitted by the time your application is due. So I think that was a lot of information. And if you have any questions about what I just shared, and then here's our contact information on how you can be in touch with the Game Plan College program to continue to help you in your college journey. Here's my contact information. And at this time, I welcome any questions. You can unmute yourself or feel free to share them in the chat.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go ahead and introduce some of the questions we've gotten so far, just to make sure everyone has seen the questions kind of happening in the chat. So there was one question that asked if we'll be showing students how to go through the FAFSA. So no, this workshop is not for FAFSA completion. This workshop is just to give you an overview of the FAFSA and then allow you some space to create your FSA IDs and ask questions during this time right now. We will be having a second part to this workshop series next Thursday from 5 to 7, and that workshop will actually be FAFSA completion. So if you registered for the workshop series, it'll be the same link that you used to get to the workshop today, but it'll just be next Thursday is FAFSA completion.
Okay, I just have a question. I noticed that somebody else was asking this question too. So we have the FAFSA ID. So are you all going to pull that up so you can show us how to step through to do that? Because I didn't see that, or I must have missed it.
No, so we're going to do breakout rooms, and then people will assist you doing that. Then, oh, yes, ma'am. And then so another question that we had is, just to be clear, we're doing the 2020-2021. No, so that is this current school year. So you're wanting to do the FAFSA for when you're actually in college. And so that FAFSA application is the 2021-2022. So that's the one that opened up yesterday. That's the one that we're going to be completing is the 2021-2022. And then we had another question asking if we have to fill out this FAFSA every year. So that answer is yes. So even when you're in school, this is not a one and done type of situation. You definitely have to complete the FAFSA every year that it opens for the next school year, just because they have to know whether or not your finances have changed or, you know, if anything like that, so they can adjust your financial aid package accordingly. And okay, so then another question we had was just to confirm the CSS profile is only required by certain schools, but it would be in addition to or instead of the FAFSA. And so that answer was yes, the CSS profile is only required in addition to the FAFSA for those 5 schools that you saw in the presentation. And so if you are applying to one of those 5 schools, you'll have to do the CSS profile, but it is not required by every school. And so FAFSA website, the link for that has been placed into the chat. So if you needed to know where to go, it is in the chat. And then we did have a question asking, what if we take a gap year? Do we still have to fill it out? I might suggest yes, going ahead and filling it out. 1, just for practice, but 2, because even if you are wanting to take a gap year, it might still be a good idea for you to go ahead and apply to the school now. And then just when you get that acceptance, go ahead and defer it for the next, to begin the next school year, so that you don't have to go ahead and apply. You know, when you're coming back from your gap year, it's already done. There's also schools such as like UNC Chapel Hill that have a gap year program for students to do. So it would still be a good idea for you to go ahead and do the FAFSA. If not just for practice, then for some schools who do have gap year programs, you could get some potential funding for that. And then we had another question pop up. So we can only use the parent that we are on their tax returns. So regardless of if we live with them or not, and is the FAFSA something you have to do? So no, the FAFSA is not something that you have to do, but if you are wanting federal funding and also to be eligible for state grants, then I would say yes, the FAFSA is something that you have to do, especially if you're concerned about funding or money, essentially the FAFSA is going to be sent to the schools that you apply to and the ones that you add onto your FAFSA application. And then each of those schools will individually let you know what your financial aid package is. So if you don't do the FAFSA, then those schools will kind of reach out to you, but the funding for them might be limited because you didn't fill out the FAFSA. Yes, also, like Jackie mentioned, some scholarships may need you to complete the FAFSA, and then as well as some institutional aid is also given to you through the FAFSA. So no, you don't have to complete it, but if you are wanting funding for school, then I would say yes, you would have to complete it. And then there was a question asking, is the CSS profile process open now and what is its deadline? So yes, the CSS profile should be open now. I don't believe there is like one specific deadline for the CSS profile. It's really just going to be dependent on your schools that you're applying to. They might give you a deadline to have it done by. I would say that if you do the FAFSA first, and then you can go ahead and get the CSS profile done kind of in one sitting if you wanted to, but yeah, so you could do it in one sitting if you wanted to, because it's a lot of the same information, but it is open now, and I don't believe there's like a national deadline for it. So do I still have to register for selective service even if I am not 18? So that answer is yes. All male identifying persons who are going to be going to college, well, I guess I should say male assigned persons at birth, yes, you have to register for the selective service. If you are not 18, just go ahead and register so that it's done for when you turn 18. If you're already 18, you have to register within like 30 days of turning 18. And that's just something that you have to do. Unfortunately, that is just a must. And so we did have another question kind of asking about, can I submit the 2022-2023 school year FAFSA? So like Ms. Junis said in the chat, that won't open up until next year. So you can't plan in advance for it. You'll also need your 2020 taxes for that one as well. So you wouldn't be able to kind of plan in advance. But just knowing that it opens October 1st and just setting that reminder in your calendar, making sure that you have your taxes with you, and also making sure that you have your FSA ID and passwords ready to go. Those would all be really helpful for you, just kind of moving forward and knowing that you need that information every time. And so I did have a private question. So Arissa, I will let you know that I do see your question, and I will kind of talk to you about that. There was another question asking like, what is selective service? So that's a great question. The selective service is basically the United States military. So that is basically saying not that you are gonna go to the military, but that is just saying that if we are ever in a time of like a crisis and we need to be able to deploy troops, the selective service would initiate or reactivate, and then you might be selected to go into military service. But that is only in cases of extreme emergency. And so that's kind of like the draft system, essentially is what selective service boils down to. And so if you are male assigned at birth, you do have to register for the selective service. That is not optional. So yeah, I think that was all the questions that I'm kind of seeing. I didn't know if other people wanted to ask a couple more before we move into our breakout rooms to do small group FSA ID creation. But if I'll give it a couple more minutes, and if not, then we can go ahead and jump into the FSA ID help.
I just want to say real quickly before we all kind of break apart, just to let you guys know, next week we're having a part 2 to this session, which will focus more on going kind of in depth on the FAFSA application. So today was kind of just to give you a quick overview and learn how to make your FSA ID and answer any questions that you have if you've already started. But definitely please sign up and register for, I think it's actually the same registration link for next week's session. Is it, Bree?
Yes, so it's the same,
okay.
Same registration link.
Yeah, so just make sure that you go to that one if you've already started or would like some more specific help. We'll be going more in depth next week during that session.
And so we did have a couple more questions pop up. So there was one that asked, where do you have to apply for selective service? So there's a question in the FAFSA application when you're going through and working on it that asks if you have registered for the selective service, and it gives you the list of people who have to. So that is where you're gonna say, you know, no, I haven't registered. And then it'll go on to ask if you would like to be registered, and you would just say yes, so that you already have it done and don't have to go back and do it. But if you don't do that question on the FAFSA, then I would connect with your college advisor and ask them for the link, because there is a website that you can go to for selective service and opt into it that way. But the easiest way is definitely going to be by completing your FAFSA. And so then we did have another question asking, do we need our parents for the FSA ID? So you don't need your parents to create your own FSA ID, but you will have to have your parents create their FSA ID. So no to having them create one for you, but yes to having them create one for yourself. And if you already have an FSA ID made, no, you don't have to stay and go into the breakout room, but you can stay if you have other questions. And then how early can we do the FAFSA? Can we do it as early as today or tomorrow? Absolutely. I always try to get my personal FAFSA done when I was in college the day that it opened, as long as the website didn't crash on me. I typically got it done the day that it opened. So yes, you can do it today, you can do it tomorrow. Really, you can do it at any point after October 1st. Okay, great. And thank you. So I will, is it hard to fill out? I will say that it is not hard to fill out as long as you have the proper information ready to go. And we need to be 18 to register for the selective service. No, you don't have to be 18, but you do have to register once you turn 18, if that makes sense. So you do have to register for it. You can do it in advance. That's not an issue. But yes, so you have to be 18, or once you turn 18, you have to register. But before you turn 18, you can always just go ahead and register. Hopefully that was clear for you, Jonathan. That box off. Sign up for part 2. Okay, so where do you sign up for part 2? So you've already signed up with this this registration, so you are good to go for part 2. I'd maybe just set a reminder in your phone, and then you can use this same link to come back. And then, yeah, you can use the same link to come back next week for part 2. And then, is it optional for either parent or both to create an FSA ID? It's not optional because you will have to have them sign it, but if your parent does not have a social to be able to make an FSA ID, then I would definitely connect with your college advisor, but we'd have to get you a signature page in order to send it off. And as you all know, with the mail service right now, it's a little bit crazy. So I would say that if your parents are able to create their FSA ID, to go ahead and have them create it. And just have them sign it electronically, because that's going to be the fastest, most efficient way to be able to get everything signed and turned in. Yes, Josh Hexter. To confirm, yes, both the student and parent will need to have your own separate FSA IDs and passwords, because at the very end of the application, both of you will have to sign it electronically. So you can't sign for yourself and your parent. So that's why you both have to have your separate logins. Oh, and that's great. So if you don't have a printer, definitely reach out to Ms. Jackie, or you can reach out to myself or your advisor at your school, and we can connect you with Ms. Jackie. But they are definitely willing to print out the signature page for you, mail it back to your house for you to sign, and then mail it off for you. So we definitely have resources if you don't have printing options at home. So please let us know if you either have an issue with yourself or your parent creating your FSA ID, or if you need to have a signature page printed off, please connect with us so that we can get those resources to you.